Hey everyone! It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. What fun to visit with Tammy Bennett on this episode. Enjoy listening about her life of adventure, from serving in the military to living on the prairie of North Dakota. Enjoy. Let me welcome you to A Quilter's Life.
Thank you.
So glad that you're willing to be interviewed today.
Yep.
So to let people know, Tammy and I probably knew each other in high school, but not
a little
well.
Bit.
Yeah. And I just looked back in our yearbook, and we were a grade apart. So I graduated the year before you did.
Uh-huh.
So you ended up going to the same church that I had gone to, and you got to know my parents.
Yes.
By the way, my mom says hi.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, your dad was always a blessing and encouraging on child training and child discipline.
Oh, yes, he was strong on the discipline. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When I was 6 weeks old, my mom and I flew out to be with my dad, who was in the U.S. Army stationed in Munich, Germany. And
wow.
So this was 1961. And I think I contribute that to my world travels because I've been doing it since I was 6 weeks old. So we lived there 3 years, and we flew over there, but we came home 3 years later on a ship. And I don't remember a lot of it. From there, we went back to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and was there for a while. And then in 1970-71, my dad transferred with AT&T to San Francisco, California. So then I grew up in Rohnert Park, California since 1971. And we lived in what was called A section. So,
okay. You got there just the year after I did because we moved there in 70. So, and we were in B section.
Right. So then I graduated in 1979. We're having our 40th year high school thing in a couple weeks.
Uh-huh.
And I haven't decided if I'm not really going, but I have friends that are going, so I might crash part of the party. But my mom still lives out in California, so I will be going back to California for that to see her. And it just happened to fall on the same weekend as the class reunion. So when I graduated, I had joined the U.S. Army, and I left high school and went straight into that summer. I went into basic training and was in the Army for 4 years active, and I went back to Germany. And so I spent 2 years in Germany as a U.S. soldier and traveled on my leave time in the military, and went to France and Switzerland and Holland and Austria and, of course, Germany, traveled around Germany. And then I met my best friend in the U.S. Army, and we got married after we came back stateside, and we were stationed at Fort Hunter Liggett, California.
Where is that?
It is down by Atascadero, Santa Barbara area.
Okay.
And it's when we were there, and probably still, it's connected to a huge national park, which I think it's Paso Robles I forget the actual name of the national park, but it's a pretty big park out there. They tested not weapons, but they tested, like, the Humvee was one thing that they were testing when we were out there. And my husband and I, we worked with, we were computer operators. And so we helped gather the information that came off the videos, and they were just getting into where you put monitors on the soldiers and different things so they
wow.
could practice war games and things
that
like that.
That was early on.
Yes. It was when a computer took up, a whole huge room and with tapes, and that's what we did in Germany too. We were a sophisticated inventory, with cards and tapes and things like that we did over in Germany. And we were again stationed in a training unit that we weren't out in the field playing war games and doing all that kind of stuff. We were providing the information or inventory for giving all the soldiers that were out in the field and they were away from their units. So ever since I've met my husband, I've kind of lived in the middle of nowhere. And it's good. I really enjoy it. And so we had, because I grew up in Rohnert Park, I attended First Baptist Church of Rohnert Park. And when we got out of the military and was looking to settle down, and my parents were still in the area, we were looking for a church home. We had both, my husband, right after we got married, he actually got saved and trusted Christ as his Savior. And then when we settled down with Berean Baptist in Rohnert Park, and then I got saved, and shortly thereafter.
Oh, wow.
And then we were raising our kids, and we had 8 children, and my husband was born and raised in North Dakota, and he just got to thinking and feeling like, North Dakota was a good place to grow up, and we were wanting to kind of get out of the suburbs and more into the country. We were homeschooling our kids, and we just kind of wanted, we were still really involved with the church, but we wanted to just have a home of our own in the country. Yeah. So he moved us back to North Dakota here in 1996. And we were in a house that was being renovated. It was kind of like camping. but we our first winter in 1996-97 was, they had Blizzard Hannah.
Oh, no.
Which dumped, and the whole winter was like every other week was a blizzard, but Blizzard Hannah was the really dumpy one. And what was so kind of interesting to me was that it dumped on April 15th, and you're thinking that winter's almost over. And we lived in a little valley by a river, and so there was just so much going on out in the country with wildlife and the blizzards and everything, that the kids thought it was one adventure after the other. And so...
Were you thinking, Lord, did you know what you were doing?
Not really. I mean, my introduction to snow was Germany. And I had showed up, a California girl, in October in Germany, which is on the same longitude as North Dakota, so they have winters. And so when it first started falling, I thought, oh, this is kind of nice. But when it drops really cold, almost freezing and below freezing, and I'm like, and military wool underclothes are so itchy. So that was an introduction. So I kind of knew. So the kids just thought it was an adventure, and they enjoyed we had moved in the springtime, so so it was a ton of country adventures before that, and then winter was like really interesting and fun and beautiful, and it was the old timers who had lived there forever that was going, no, 6 months of winter is not fun, people. 6 months of winter is not normal. And we're going, really? We thought North Dakota always had bad winters. So we just kind of were expecting the worst. So we thought, this is just what they do here. And it wasn't. So, but we don't have a lot of global warming up here. But, yeah, especially this winter. This winter was very long and very, very cold. But
again,
yeah. So that's pretty much that we moved here, and for a little while we went to church up in Canada, which it's not too where we live. We're on the prairie, and when you cross over into Canada, it's more prairie. So you really don't know that you've changed places until you see landmarkers that say, hey, you've entered Canada. And which is kind of funny because sometimes you think when you go to a different country it should be really different, but Canadian people are our friends in this area. They're very much back and forth. So in 2004, my husband had been working for actually the border. He's an immigration officer that works on the port. On the U.S. and Canadian border. And so we bought a school. And the school was built in 1961, which is the same age as my husband and I. And we bought it for under $2,000. And it's a full school, kindergarten through high school. It had only been closed down for 30 days. And we moved in and started another adventure. And and we're still here, but now we have it up for sale, and he's close to retiring, and the kids have all moved away, and so it's like it's way too big. And unless the Lord shows us something else to do with the school, we're looking to move and maybe move a little bit south, maybe, I don't know. We have children that are all around the United States and the world, and we visit our daughter in China a lot, and we really enjoy China. The people there are sweet. Their government's not so great, but ours has some issues too, so but the people are very sweet. So the kids are grown. We're empty nesters, and we have 10 children. We have going to be soon 14 grandchildren, and that's our prize. So let's see. I'm a stay-at-home mom still. I feel like I'm in retirement. When my last child graduated from high school and everything, I feel like, wow, I did, 30 years of homeschooling. So that's retirement. And and being I have so many rooms in a school, I do have my own sewing room. Took a few years for kids to kind of move out for me to get it, but so that's what I enjoy doing, especially in the wintertime, is the quilting and the knitting.
When did you get into quilting? Who introduced you to it?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I started sewing when I was in elementary school with 4-H. And I had started with a hot pad that looked kind of like a cat or something like that, and then I made an apron, and it was with 4-H, and entered it, and I entered cookies and sewing, and my sewing won first place and my cookies won second. So that kind of tells you the rest of my life where I like to be, in the sewing instead of in the cooking. But my husband laughs and teases me. He goes, I thought cooking and cleaning were two cities in China, and I can tell you there's no city named cooking or cleaning in China. So, and then when I was in junior high, which I loved it because you got to start having electives and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so I took home economics, and Mrs. Cream was my home ec teacher. And she was exactly what I just love about sewing is I like it when you have the rules or the instructions in written form and you can read them so you can follow them. That's why I love God's Word, is I can look at that and go, okay, that's what you said. That's what you want me to do. I guess I'm a better reader than I am a listener. So she introduced us to me to sewing. My mom sewed, but Mrs. Cream taught me how to do it and why to do it. And
that was at the junior high?
Yes.
Okay.
In Rohnert Park. I really enjoyed her, and she taught me a lot about even cooking on following instructions, you know, and so I really enjoyed that. I never took any cooking in high school because I'm like, you got to do dishes. But I actually, when I have my daughter-in-laws come and stuff, I'll say, you cook and I'll do the dishes. And I don't even have a dishwasher, but I would rather have everybody sit down to a meal that they're used to, or, you know, the family, instead of trying to force my cooking down them, which my cooking, you know, hasn't killed anybody yet, but and no one starves in the house. But then I continued in high school, and that's where I pretty much met you, was in sewing classes and needlework classes, and I just continued there. And so we did, I took a needle, I think it was a needlework class, and I think it's Mrs. McGowan was the high school teacher, and you had to do a quilt sampler, and we did embroidery, and it was 1976 because I started a quilt that had red, white, and blue colors, and it was hearts and stars. And so I finally finished it like years later. But I did finish it. So that was the first quilt I ever did, and so it was due to high school.
Wow.
Just kind of fell in love with it. I fell in love with sewing first, and that was because I was so skinny that everything hung on me or fell off. So I had to learn how to take in my clothes or to make my own clothes. Yeah. And so those were some frustrating days with arms that were pointing straight up instead of hanging down. Oh, those shoulders. Anyways. So, yeah.
And you mentioned some other crafts that you do. What do you do besides quilting?
I do enjoy knitting, and I had started in with crochet, which I had learned in high school. I also enjoy needlework. The kind of needlework I enjoy is applique and silk ribbon embroidery. So I've done those. Anything that kind of turns into a pink flower is something that I really enjoy. It's like, oh, if I can make something as beautiful as a flower or things like that. So it's like color, and I think the older I get, the more colors I just love. And because I was pretty, it was red, my favorite color. And now as I get older, I'm learning to love all the colors. And while I was in the military, it was like, no, I want nothing that's green. So I really love natural fibers. I enjoy cottons, which I really enjoy when I'm quilting is cottons. Mm-hmm. But I love knitting with cotton, and I love the different kinds of wools that there are. And so I got really interested in, my mom had taken some spinning classes, and so I enjoy handling the fibers in the animals. And so I had learned a little bit about alpacas, and they have a really unique fiber that can be lightweight, but yet it's fire resistant and it's very, very warm. And I was interested because I had met llamas, and I was like, no, llamas are so big. And my youngest girls were in 4-H and did sheep. And we had some fun, adventurous time with showing the sheep and raising the sheep and just even learning about lamb and all that kind of things for cooking and things like that. And and again, it's kind of like brings me back to the Bible because of the Lamb of God and the Passover and all these kind of things. So so when we were working with the sheep, you know, they're a lot smaller. A llama is, you know, head tall, and a sheep is waist tall. And so I enjoyed that. And then I found out that alpacas are kind of like just a little bit bigger than a sheep and a size of a small deer. And I was at a quilt shop, and they had some yarn, and it was alpaca yarn, and it was from a local person. And I said, "Where did this come from?" And they're like, "Oh, there's a girl here in town that is raising these, and this is her alpaca's yarn." And it was just gorgeous. It was natural colored, and it was a red, and which I like, and then a dark chocolate brown, which I like. Dark chocolate's health food, especially if you add almonds. And so she was going off to college. She was graduating high school and going off to college. And I called her and I said, "I just love your fiber and your wool, and what are you doing with your alpacas?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm either going to have to sell them or something because I'm leaving home, and they're just kind of means that my parents have to take care of them and stuff." And I said, "Well, would you consider somebody boarding your alpacas?" And so I volunteered. I said, "I'll watch your alpacas this year if you like where the setup that we have." And we had the sheep, and we had a horse, and so we had a fenced-in area with the barn. And so she came. She says, "Yeah, this work." I said, "If you pay for the food, I'll watch them and take care of them." And so I did that for 2 winters. It was just awesome because they weren't mine. Yeah. So I didn't have to buy them because they're extremely expensive to buy. And there's really the investment is more in showing them or maybe even breeding them than ever in the fiber part of it. And so I knew that I was at this age where I'd never probably start raising alpacas. I'm going to do that during the millennium. Anyways, I raised them and got to, you know, feed them and go out and actually interact with them and stuff and pet them. And she had them since they were young, so they were pretty tame, and they were 2 males, and they were just hilarious to watch. And they're right outside the yard in what we would think of as a school playground, is where our pen is with the barn. Their fiber is awesome, but they also go to the bathroom in the same place. So shoveling the barn out was really convenient. No. So I did that, and that's kind of my love is natural fibers. And I tend to stop at quilt shops and yarn shops. So that's my other interest.
Do you have any idea how many quilts you have made?
Oh, no. I know that I have made I have one more quilt for one more child to make. So, but I enjoyed machine embroidery. And so my husband got me, it must have been in, in 1990, in that time frame. And he got me a sewing machine that did machine embroidery.
Yeah.
And so he started volunteering every baby that came along.
Oh, no.
And because what I would do is I would make these baby quilts, and he always requested the baby ribbons on them. And he likes blanket ribbons on his blanket, so he said, babies like this too. And then I would put their name and their birth date, and I would usually put around the edges, Jesus loves you, and so it would be a keepsake for the baby to have of when they were born. And my grandmother would send us knitted blankets, baby blankets, and my daughter Sadie, who is 30, she still has the one that her grandmother made for her, her great-grandmother. That thing has been all over the world a couple times, and it's kind of like more string than it is blanket, but she has that. And so my husband, I had done it for my kids, and my youngest was a preemie that was 3 months early, and she weighed 1 pound 10 ounces. So I spent 3 months in Fargo, which is 4 hours from home, and I was pumping milk because I couldn't store it for her, and I had to keep pumping it until she could actually have milk.
Yeah.
And because there was like a month or so where she couldn't even have breast milk yet. So I was sewing blankets for her and baby clothes because she was so tiny and more like doll clothes.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the beginning of making a blanket. And so then, because I put her name and birthday on, like, all her blankets and everything, my husband goes, oh, can you make this for this person that's having babies at work? You know, the wife's pregnant. Can you do this one at church? And so a lot of the new mothers at church, I would make baby blankets for them, too. And so, and then when my kids started getting married, I would make wedding quilts for them. It usually didn't get there before the wedding. In fact, my son, who just got married a year and a half ago, he's the first one that got a wedding quilt before he got married, and he's number 7, so that tells you how behind I was. But so, and then I make baby quilts for my grandkids too. So no, I do not have any idea how many I've done. I could probably tell you about each one and then maybe count them up, but so.
Isn't it amazing? My mom has a friend that I think she met her at Berean, but she now lives in South Carolina, and she had made a bunch of quilts for a camp out there.
Oh, okay.
We went to visit her, and she had these books. She had a picture of every quilt she had made.
Oh.
And it was so neat to see.
Yeah. So, is that like Mrs. Crandall, maybe?
That's her name, yes.
Yeah. I've seen some of her quilts, and yes, they're gorgeous. And that's always nice.
She has a long arm machine.
Yep.
So, it was really neat to see. So instead of taking a picture and putting them in a book, I've made a PowerPoint, so I keep adding a page each time I make a quilt. Putting it on
that's
PowerPoint.
A good idea. Yeah, I have a little book that has some scraps and things of them, but other than that, I'm like, no, I just am too busy getting on to the next project. So,
there's that too. When you're making your quilts, do you have a favorite tool that you are so glad that you have?
Well, I really like my Pfaff sewing machine. It has a walking foot and that's built into it, and so I've always really loved it. and I was taught how to sew on a Singer sewing machine. And my mom, actually my grandmother, my dad's mother, she wasn't the first one to teach me to sew, but her and my sisters, we made a quilt for my mom and dad, and we did it, and it was double knit. And so it was all this fabric that us girls had used when we were sewing. My mom had we got scraps from her, and my mom didn't know we were doing this. And so we made this huge king-size double knit quilt for my mother and dad, and signed it with those, it's not a marking pen, but in those days it was like a paint pen thing. And so then it was really heavy. And so my mom had it for many years, and then she cut it into fours. And she gave each piece, she gave a section to each of us girls. There was 3 of us, and then she had one. And so we did that, and that's really meant a lot to all of us girls. So we made a quilt, they shared it, and then we've cut it and did it, and then we've kept it. And I go back and I look, I said, oh, I remember when I made that dress out of double knit. And stuff like that, and that's always fun. And so I like my sewing machine, and I really enjoy rotary cutters. That's like helps speed up, and rulers. One of my favorite things for my son that I did is I like log cabin, but I had never done a full-blown out log cabin quilt, and I did one for his wife and him. And what was fun with that one was my son volunteered me to make this quilt, and it was like only a few months before they were going to get married. And his mother-in-law was wanting to give a quilt to her daughters. So his mother-in-law-to-be and I worked together on making a quilt for them. She paid for it, and we went shopping for the material for it. And so we picked out the material and everything, and I showed her several different quick patterns, and log cabins was one of them. And so I put it all together. Well, when I was doing that, Marty Michelle, she has rulers, and she has these log cabin rulers that just make making a log cabin just zip out so fast. And you can use them to make different size log cabins and curved log cabins, and so it's really, really nice. And it keeps it so that it's all everything comes out exactly the same. So your blocks go together very, very quickly and very fast, and they come out square.
Wow.
And so I just highly recommend, and I even got to see some of her stuff. I'm going to put in a little plug for Lincoln, Nebraska has the International Quilt Museum, and if you ever go through there, stop in and see the museum, whatever. But they did have Marty Michelle when I went through last year, and so that was really fun to see that and read her story about how she got started into professional quilt making and designing.
Yeah.
And so those are probably, and my scissors. You can't do anything without a good pair of scissors, even if you're using a rotary cutter. Scissors are just, nice. So those are, and another thing that I do is the purple thing. Have you ever heard of that one? It's just this long plastic stick that's only probably 4 or 5 inches long. It's called the purple thing, and it has a kind of pointed end and a flat end, and it's helped to feed your stuff through, but it also has this slightly stiletto end, so you can poke things, and it saves your hands and your fingers from the needle, and it's plastic, so it doesn't do a lot of damage like a metal stiletto does if you're feeding it through. So that one's one that I've even broke it once, and I had to look forever to go find another one. So, and I kept asking at different quilt shops. I'm like, do you guys have the purple thing? Oh, no, we don't carry that. I said, you should. so yeah. No. I'm just amazed at some of the technology that they've given to us, because when we first moved to North Dakota, one of our neighbor ladies, she came over, and this was 1996, and she introduced herself, and she had grown up and lived and raised kids and family and everything in North Dakota for all her life, and she had been through the World War II and the Depression and everything, and they did a lot of quilting, and but they didn't have the quilt shops like we do, you know, and they would talk about old coats. They'd get together, neighbors and stuff, and they'd swap out old coats so that they could get different colors and different designs out of the wool coats, and to make the designs. And I always thought she was amazing of how they come up with beautiful stuff, or stuff that's usable, and things out of everyday, ordinary things that we have to have, but they don't waste anything.
Yeah.
And then when we went through the International Quilt Museum, they had a display of quilts made by soldiers, and it was during the way back in I want to say the Crimean War. I'm not getting it right, but it was way back before World War I and World War II. I mean, it was back there. And the soldiers did some of it for therapy, and sometimes they made quilts for family members to send back to family members, so that the family members would have something that was theirs. And they did it out of uniforms. And their uniforms were the greens, the browns, and there was reds in there. And it was kind of British. There was a lot of British in that. And just the applique and the stuff, it was pieces of art. And it was quilts, and huge quilts. And they do it for therapy, and they do it for family. And so that one was a really interesting thing, and I'm sure they didn't have all the fancy gadgets that we do.
Oh, no.
But they made such beautiful. One was a photograph, and it was like in Parliament or something. It was like a political picture. And the quilt out of wool fabric, soldiers' uniforms, and then he did a lot of embroidery on it besides the applique, and it looked like the picture.
Wow.
I know. I'm just thinking, yeah, your scissors must have gotten dull using wool. So it's just amazing people's talents and what they can do with little or with much.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that we do have the internet to see all the different designers and the fabric designs. And my husband, I like Pinterest just for the fact that I can collect anything I want, and it doesn't collect dust. And I don't have to store it, in the house or anywhere. And so I'm always different quilt designs and fabric designers, and even with the knitting and everything. And I'm just, you travel the world and can meet all these people over the internet that design beautiful different fabrics, and then, because you walk into a quilt store and you see a designer's name on the fabric that you're buying, but do you really even know anything about them or why? And after a while, you get to notice, well, oh yeah, that's so-and-so's designs because that's the colors they like. Or I don't know if you've ever heard of, I'm going to forget her last name, and it's Pink. Anyways, she always has just really bright colors, and just she it's like a collage of all these things mixed in, and it still turns out nice looking,
Yeah.
And so you can recognize their fabrics, and that's what I enjoy about having the internet, to interact with other quilters, to interact with seeing what the designers are coming out with, and I don't have to go out and buy every piece of fabric. I can just look at it. I love to touch it, but it's nice to look at it too.
Yeah.
So we're very blessed in this age for certain things.
We are. As you're working on your quilts, there's different processes we do, from the designing to the binding, all in between. Is there a certain step that you enjoy more than others?
I enjoy making the block itself, and it depends on who I'm making it for, how comfortable I feel with the design. I enjoy strip cutting with 2.5-inch strips. I enjoy jelly rolls and things like that, or even just making my own strips. And I kind of got into that when I did the log cabin quilt, and then I did a jelly roll rug, which I never feel like I can put colors together myself. I don't have that gift for designing or putting colors together, and I have to hang them up on the board or lay them out over and over again before I feel like it looks right. I enjoy when I can just get a kit or I can follow a pattern, and then I just make the blocks, and then it turns out. And I get a little, the first cuts sometimes are like, okay, is this going to work? Am I, did I, cut it right so I don't run out of any fabric?
Yeah.
And different things. And when I started making the kids' quilts for their wedding things, a lot of them were kits, and they were themed to kind of that personality. My daughter-in-law, for my older son, she's Canadian, but she loves American red, white, and blue. And so I had made her a quilt that had a women in petticoats patriotic theme, and each block actually had history of women that were involved in the Revolutionary War and stuff. And so that one was really fun, and so I enjoyed doing each block, and it was a block of the month. So I do enjoy blocks of the month. Then it kind of keeps me on schedule.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the binding, I'm like, okay, now how do I connect all my strips? And I got to go back and I watch the video of which way do I turn it? And I'm always like, why do I always forget this? And then stitching it, my eyesight, is getting worse and worse. So I'm always like the little teeny tiny stitches, and so I enjoy the block part, and I enjoy that, and getting to handle the fabric is probably one of my things, and thinking about the person that you're making it for.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's a great part of, especially when you know who you're making it for.
Yes.
It keeps your mind on them. You can pray about them.
Yes, and with my son that I did the log quilt with, and we went and picked fabric. Well, I found some. It was purples, and so you have the purple, and then I had off-white cream, and I found some fabric that had little storks carrying the little TV. So I put that in the wedding quilt, and then I had some leftover fabric from a quilt I had made, and it was it had like I love yous and stuff on it, so I put that in their quilt too. So I enjoyed that. That was really fun to kind of add a really, really personal touch into things that you enjoyed or wanted to share with them in it. So
yeah, this is supposed to be my fun question, but it doesn't always sound. What was your worst quilting experience?
Oh, let's see, my worst quilting experience. Wow. I'm not really thinking of one offhand.
Well, if you had a worst one, it would come right to mind.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know that I think that's probably why I enjoy it. There aren't any, really. I guess my worst quilting experience is that I haven't finished all the projects I want to finish. So I think that would be my worst experience. And I can think of one experience. I had just gotten my sewing machine, and it had a different foot and everything, and I forgot to change the right foot, and it had like a single hole in the middle of it, and it was plastic, but and I was changing it to like zigzag, and so when I went to go start up, it went right through the plastic and poked a hole in it.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like what have I done? I've ruined it, and just worrying about that I've ruined my machine, that cost so much, and so those have been some experiences where I was a little nerve-wracking and everything, and my husband's been pretty sweet in calming me down and letting me take it into the repair shop or buy a new one or whatever, a new foot or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that would probably be the worst thing.
So it sounds like you mainly have made quilts for family.
Yes. I have church family and close family, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then just people that my husband volunteered me to make it for. And they remember, when they see me, oh, you're the one that made the quilts for my kids. I'm like, oh, okay, how are they doing? Because I never even met them,
Right.
So, yeah. So,
is there any tip that you would want to share with others?
About quilting?
Yeah.
I would say always keep it fun. Just enjoy the people that you meet. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere, so when I get to a town that has a quilt shop, it's just fun to meet the owners of the quilt shops. We've even been through one where the owner of the quilt shop, she got cancer and she actually passed away. The shop was closed down. I guess you make certain friends when you go to a quilt conference. If you ever have a chance to go to a quilt conference or a quilt show or the fair, enjoy those, because it's just amazing to meet the people that make the quilts or meet the people that teach or meet the people that provide a way for you to get fabrics. And each quilt owner, shop owner, has their own unique taste. They try to cater to the customers, but you can still see how they have their own unique favorites and stuff in the different shops when you travel. And I enjoy getting a little ruler or a little measuring tape or something that has the quilt shop name on it. And
that's a neat idea.
And I've traveled all across the United States. My husband's really sweet about if we see a shop, he'll stop in and let me browse and sometimes let me over shop. And I guess we get to do that because we're childless and kidless and all that kind of things. And so, but it's neat. And This last year, we were out traveling with our grandkids, and we found a quilt shop, and we stopped in there, and they had a block of the month that they were doing, and I just loved the fabric. And so I bought the pattern, but they wouldn't sell me the fabric because it was a block of the month for classes, and they couldn't allow me to take it. So they gave me a little tiny sample of the one thing, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and internet or anything. And so I kept calling for over a year and waiting for this block of the month class to be totally done. And I finally got to order it from them. I'm just so thrilled that I can, deal with all these different companies and these different ladies. I have been to Missouri Quilt Star in Hamilton, Missouri, and I just really enjoy meeting and seeing the different places. It's like I've been around the world and traveled to different places, but I love going to quilt shops and seeing the towns and the people and the different places, really almost more in the history of, how'd you start it? We have a local quilt shop that a young lady started it, and she'd never had a business, and like I said, the lady that had the quilt shop, she had died of cancer, and her shop had closed down, and we didn't have a quilt shop close at all. So this young lady started a business and the quilt business, and she just does a super, super job. And I'm like, are you sure you didn't ever do this before? And so, their background is just so sweet. And then we had another one that had the oldest quilt shop in North Dakota, and it was called the Hen House, and it just recently closed down because the owner had just been doing it for so many years. It was time to retire, and it was in a little teeny tiny town off the way, 13 miles off the beaten path of the highway. It was a pretty big quilt shop and had lots of stuff in it. And it was 4 hours for me. But, yes, and be thankful if you have a lot of quilt shops so you can do shop hops and all that kind of thing, because we have to drive several days just to get a few shop hops in.
Wow.
So I enjoy UPS and the internet and U.S. mail, so I can shop and
find you.
I know, yes, they do regularly, and even through the snow and everything. So, and then, I get to know the local shop owners, and I'll call up and say, gee, I try and support them because we like to support our local shops. Right. Whether it's quilts or whatever, and because we appreciate that they hang in there, because they don't have a ton of customers. They're not making, and it's hard enough to have your own business, let alone in a small rural area. And so I'll call and I'll say, okay, I'm coming through, save it for me, or would you just put it in the mail for me and let me pay postage, because it costs a lot less to have it mailed than it does for me to drive there.
Right.
So it's just country life, but I enjoy the peace and quiet while I sew. So, unless it's pretty noisy during harvest because there's tractors and everything, and semis. But other than that, I really enjoy what God has blessed us with, and what He's allowed me to do, and doing something that's in the home, and yet I still get to just enjoy all the other blessings that God's provided in this small area, just not on a bigger scale like everybody. And it means a lot. We were just talking today or yesterday, my husband and I, about people that had come from a big city and how they're friendly enough, but they don't really understand how we're really friendly with strangers, because you never know who you're going to get to see next, because it's so few. When I first lived here, my husband was always waving every time we passed a car, and I go, do you know them? No. I said, well, why'd you wave? He goes, because you never know when you're going to have someone else to wave to. now I understand it, after living here for so long, and so you're always you enjoy company and or meeting people or just saying hello, and it's a lot friendly. We go into big cities and you say hello to somebody and they just kind of like, what do you want? And I'm like, and I enjoy it being from where I am, because I carry tracts from our church and everything, and so when we travel, I'm always, if you're ever in North Dakota, come visit us, and so I enjoy.
You're trying to get those visitors up there.
Well, it makes a great invitation to also get the gospel out to them at the same time, and so that's what I love. And I have had, because they have an address on the back for our church, I have had where I actually had handed a tract to somebody in California at a tourist thing, and they actually read it and wrote back and said that they had trusted Christ, and the letter from them got back before I got back from vacation. And so I thought that was really special and cool.
That is.
God's word is true, and it doesn't return void. Sometimes it takes longer, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tammy, for letting me interview you. I really appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of A Quilter's Life. You can find more stories on aquilterslife.com or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Thanks for listening.